Hi, everybody, and welcome to this new event published by Hospitality Net. I am Simone Porto. I will be your moderator for the next 45, 50 minutes or so. We got three amazing guests today here with us. I want to personally thank all of them for joining us today. And I will go clockwise on my screen. I suppose you should see the same order I see on my screen. Let's start with just below myself, Babs van Gilst. Again, this is the best pronunciation I can get with your name. And change manager in the quick service restaurant industry, but on and off 30 years in Hilton. Is that correct, Babs?
That well, on and off, yes. And first of all, thank you for having me, Simone. It's a pleasure to be here. I have indeed worked with Hilton on and off for about 30 years. I started in operations with Hilton at the Hilton Barcelona, and then moved to a couple of different companies. Euro Disney is one of them, all in operations, and then moved to become a PMS installer. So the PMS is actually my first love. It's where I first came across Uli when I was installing PMS for Hilton. I then moved on to being more of a project manager on the PMS for Hilton, and later on into more digital product roles, most of them still working with and connecting to the PMS.
So if I got it right, this were the 90s, right?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay. Okay, that's very good. That's very good. And then we got Michael Levie, co-founder of it's not mystery, my favorite hotel group in the world, citizenM. Michael, thank you so much for being with us today.
No, my pleasure. Looking forward. Yeah, I can. I'm looking forward to for those that meet me for the first time. My background is operational hotel management. Always been very passionate about technology. And when we started citizenM 16, 17 years ago, we spent a lot of time and effort in making sure that our technology would be leading and would be able to position the company and propel us into the future. So we have a lot of focus and experience there.
Have we lost Simone?
We lost Simone.
Looks like well, so. Uli. I'm going to continue and just briefly introduce myself. So I'm Uli Pillau, one of the founders of Apaleo, based out of Munich, Germany. I'm coming originally from the hotel industry, but I've spent the past 30 plus years, I can say it, in hotel technology. So I was part of the team that built up Fidelio over 10 years. Then I did Ideas over 10 years. And since a couple of years, obviously, we have started a new company with a new platform. And this is apaleo.
That's very good. Okay, guys, I think I lost you for a second. I don't know what happened. My screen went black. I had a question for you, Michael, before going back to Uli. And I was living in France, and I lived in France for 7 years, and then I moved back to Italy a few months ago. And one of the best things I had back in Paris was going to citizenM La Défense like once every couple of weeks to work there. It was always an amazing experience. And so my question is, and this is just out of personal curiosity, are you going to open anything in Italy anytime soon?
Roma is under construction.
I live in Rome, so I would love that.
Yeah, very good. We're building a property right in the Jewish quarter, right on the Tibre. So wow. Yeah, we're very excited about that. It's a relatively small hotel, about 154 rooms, but we're very exciid to come to Rome in Italy.
That's very good. That's very good. Great. Can't wait.
And if you know a good spot in Milan, let us know.
Well, let's have a private conversation about that. Yes, okay. Why not? But I'm very happy that I will have my home office in my workstation in Rome as well. It's something I really miss, not living in Paris even longer. So Uli, I saw that you took my place and you introduced yourself. Thank you very much for that. So for the ones that actually did read the viewpoint, and you can find it on HospitalityNet. It's called "Where Does the PMS Sit in the New Technology Stack?" You see that there were many different comments, and I think, and I don't know if I'm right about that, I did write several articles about PMSs, I think at least half a dozen over the last couple of years. And it's one of those topics that is always very controversial, okay? It looks like everybody has an opinion when it comes to PMS. And you always have like this us versus them kind of mentality, okay? Cloud provider versus legacy system, API versus user experience and so forth. So every time I talk about PMS, at least in my personal experience, I'm always in this situation where you need to kind of keep it like a little below the radar, not to make it too controversial. And again, of course, it's not what we're doing today. This is totally unpolitically correct, so we can say whatever we want about PMSs. I will start with that though. When I wrote the viewpoint, I started from the assumption that maybe the main problem we have with PMSs today is semantic. It's in the name itself. You know, when we talk about PMS, we talk about literally a system that manages a property. But we see that this is not always the case. You know, we have some new wave of PMSs, for example, being more hubs rather than only one platform, etc. So again, I will start clockwise asking you the question. Let's start with Babs. And Babs, again, you worked 30 years in Hilton, so I think you're very qualified to answer that. Do you think the main notion of PMS as we know it is dead and is going to be replaced by something else?
I do, totally. And it pains me to say that, because as I said in my introduction, the PMS was my first love and I'm finding it hard to let go. But I don't think the PMS as I knew and loved it, however many years ago that we agreed I wouldn't say, doesn't exist anymore. I still think there is a space for a central system in the hotel for certain functions that don't need to be unique. And I think even that will depend on the hotel to define what those are. But some of them could be your folio, the checkout process, making sure you have the legal requirements and having that folio printed and the right reports that go to accounts. No hotel needs to be unique in that particular area. So that will potentially be something that I could see as being part of the PMS. There is the housekeeping side, assuming that you're not a massive, large hotel that wants to have advanced technology to manage housekeepers' productivity and track housekeeper productivity and all of those kind of things. If you're a smaller hotel and you're just looking at getting which room is occupied and which room is leaving, you may still, I think, see a place for that piece of functionality in the PMS. But I think on a bigger scale, most companies have already moved away from having everything sitting in the PMS. If you look at the larger companies, all the distribution, all the reservations is sitting above. CRM, I would struggle to name a hotel chain that uses a PMS to market to their customers. Most companies I think, are starting to nibble away at all the hotel PMS functionality. And so it becomes a lot more modular and a question of picking and choosing. There may be features, as I said earlier on, that still sit at the property and that we could consider PMS. Whether PMS is the right word for that, I don't know. I had a discussion with a property company, a property management company, and they also had a system called PMS, and they truly use it to manage their properties. So maybe it's time to think of something different and distinguish ourselves from being in the real estate.
I think I can agree with that. When do you think this switch started? You know, this tendency to disconnect some feature from the PMS and rely more on CRMs, for example?
Well, I think a lot of that came with, to some extent, the internet. When I first started doing PMS installations, those were the days where we didn't have the internet. There was, when we were lucky, there was one cable into the hotel, and if you had a laptop and you could connect, you could go in queue and get that one cable and dial out, and then hope that nobody was sending you the pictures from their kid that was just born, because then you'd be blocking it for the next 45 minutes. So obviously in those days, having cloud systems, having and being able to rely on something sitting somewhere else was not an option. And then if you're a single hotel, having 50 different pieces of software to manage, to host, to train your teams on, etc., was not an option. With the internet, that's no longer an issue, right? I can have software as a service sitting above property. I don't need to have an IT manager sitting on property to maintain all of these solutions. So it becomes much easier for a hotelier to pick and choose what they want to use, and a lot cheaper. And the training cost is so much lower. Again, when I was installing PMS, and at one point when we were talking about Oracle, one of the big discussions was, do we need to do mouse training? Will people know how to use their mouse? These days, you don't need to train anybody on how to use a keyboard or a mouse or Microsoft or Outlook or whatever it is. So even the training barrier has become that much lower, because everybody is so connected and because everybody is on their device every single day. And that, again, is another barrier to entry that is now gone and allows you to have a lot more different systems.
Well, I've been in the industry for 22 years now, but I think this is the first time I hear about mouse training.
Honestly, it was a feature. It was a thing.
I can imagine. And Michael, in pretty much the same question for you. In your experience, do you think that we probably need to evolve when it comes to the idea we have of PMSs, or do you think that a PMS as we know it still has some kind of relevance in the industry?
Well, I would like to go back to its core functionality for a split second. So we used to have our inventory and administration managed through PMS, right? But besides those two functionalities, there's really, over time and over evolution, a third functionality that sort of slipped in. It's the connector of everything else. And it was never set up to be the connector for everything else. So a room-centric system, trying to be the connector to everything else being guest-centric is difficult. Plus, all the interfaces were very functionally focused, right? So if we look today and we look at the evolution, we have so many systems, and today with the focus being on digital and the need to have rich profiles, all of a sudden we realize that connecting function is what is missing. So we need to have a platform to connect us. We need to have middleware to connect us. We need to do different things. But PMSs, as we know them today, are not good connectors. So open source is a requirement. But, it's just functionality that never evolved. And I don't think that the PMS industry has taken that responsibility on very well. So everybody is queuing up to get an interface certified to be able to communicate, whereas that should be a base functionality besides its functional elements. So I agree with Babs. The PMS does not have to continue to live as PMS. There is going to be platforms that provide you with the connectivity, and there is PMS functionality that you then can apply to that. But PMS, as we know the company.
Michael, I think you're breaking up. Okay, well, I will wait for Michael to come back. Uli, Michael briefly mentioned API, and when I think about APIs in the PMS world, apaleo is one of the first names that come to mind. Okay, it's like you heavily marketed yourself as an open API system, or an API first system. Could you elaborate on that a little for me?
Yeah, sure. And this is very much related actually to the history and evolution of PMS, where in the past and still today, in most of the cases, the PMS is at the center of everything. And this is what Michael was just talking about. So you saw the first PMSs on a PC basis coming to the market a long time ago. That's where Hilton started to use Fidelio, and some other PC-based key PMSs came to the market, but that was kind of an isolated functionality sitting in the PMS, just doing reservations, check-in, check-out, inventory, some of the other things. And then actually it became much more complicated because many more systems were coming, distribution, OTAs, channel managers, CRMs, revenue management, and so on. So that whole thing grew to something very big and very complicated. And still the PMSs were trying to handle all of these integrations. And then the next level was when beginning of between 2010 and 2012, I would say, the first true cloud PMSs, native cloud PMSs came to the market. So the difference was that they were able to sit in the cloud already and then add some APIs on top of the PMS. So the whole way of integrating and offering interfaces was becoming a little bit easier for everybody, but still the main problem remained. Regardless whether it's a legacy PMS or a cloud PMS, the PMS was still at the center, or is still at the center of everything. And the way we look at it is that a couple of years back, new technology platforms came onto the market, and that allowed to do things completely different. So instead of developing into the PMS, you could actually do it differently and develop into the API cloud platform. And the API platform would then sit at the center and handle all of these key functions. Still the same thing: inventory, rates, prices, check-in, check-out, folios, invoices, and so on. However, the big difference is it is just one single API platform where everybody can connect and attach very easily, very quickly, without limitations. So if you look at the true platforms on the market, actually you could do much more. You could even go ahead and develop PMSs and other user interfaces and pieces on top of such a platform. So what I want to say is, if you have a fully open API first platform where all of the functionality sits, it's actually open to anybody. Anybody, any developer, any hotel group, any software company, any app could come to the market and put their own developments on top of the platform and even develop new PMSs on top of this platform. So let's take an example. If you had a company that had a great hotel app that would work in a hotel environment, it is not said that the same app would work in a hostel environment, for example, or in a long stay apartment environment. So you could imagine that anybody that knows that space could come now and say, we want to develop a PMS user interface and functionality for the hostel world, and we want to put it on top of this API platform. Even this is already possible today. So the limitations by doing API first compared to doing cloud PMSs or legacy PMSs with integrations on top of it is dramatic. There is no comparison, really.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle. And so, Michael, we lost you for a second. Sorry,
Sorry about that. I don't know where I dropped off, but I had some internet issues.
Never mind. But it was your point was very clear so far. We just lost probably the last 5 seconds. And okay. So let's move back to Babs, because you said something interesting, and that I think it's worth elaborating on a little. And when we talk about the functionality of a PMS, okay, because again, the problem is that 20 years ago, when we talk about PMSs, pretty much we had all the same stuff in mind, okay, the same providers, okay, and that was pretty much it, okay. So my idea of a PMS was your idea of PMS, and was the industry idea of a PMS. Today, the market is on some kind of gray area in a way. When you say PMS, we're not always referring to the same technology, right? And the apaleo approach, to me, it's a perfect example of that. But let's say if we want to come with a definition of PMS, okay? What do you think that the main feature should be built in the PMS And what feature do you think can be integrated by third parties, for example, without losing that centrality in operations?
So I don't think I have a black and white answer for you on that one, or a list, because this could take many shapes. But I think the interesting evolution that we've seen is as you were saying, like 20 years ago, when you opened a hotel, you went, what PMS am I going to choose? And it would be a selection of 2, maybe 3, maybe 5 vendors. We all knew it, and you knew what you were going to get, and that was it. And I think that has changed today, or at least for a lot of companies has changed. And I think it has to change. And you need to start saying is, what is the customer experience that I want to provide? How am I going to make the customer experience at my hotel unique and different to what they get at every other hotel on the planet? And then what do I need to therefore want to control for that customer? Where do I want to have that uniqueness? And then from there, you can take it and say, fine, I want to have the best in class CRM. Is there a PMS that's going to provide me that? No, probably not. I'm going to go to a specialized CRM company and get the CRM functionality that I want. Maybe I want to be completely digital, and I'm looking at Michael at citizenM. I don't want to have a check-in. I want to check in through the app, and I want the check-in to be seamless. Where can I get that kind of functionality that's going to provide me, to give me at least the app experience? And then what PMS, if we're going to call it PMS, is going to allow me to have that kind of integration. What other unique experiences do I want to have? How am I going to get the guests to communicate with the team members? Do I still have a phone in the room, or am I going to get the guest to communicate with the team member through an app or through an iPad that's in the room or through the TV? How am I going to be different to every single other hotel out there? And then based on that, you're going to choose, I'm going to get an outside CRM platform, I'm going to build my own app, or I'm going to get that company to build my app, or I'm going to use an app specialist, I'm going to get whatever functionality here. Then what are the bits that I'm okay to let go, that I don't need to be unique, you need to be unique for? And I was mentioning maybe the reporting which room is occupied and which room needs to be clean. I mentioned earlier, and this is one thing that the PMSs are very, very good at, and that another company is probably not going to be able to do as easily, is the fiscal side and the folio side. What do I need to have on the folio? A lot of PMS companies have years and years of legacy of having studied and gone to every country and said, this is what I need to do in order to be legally compliant. So take that from a PMS. But notice that I didn't say checkout, because maybe I want to do checkout in an app. It needs to connect, as Uli says, to the PMS, because we want that API and that functionality and the automation. But my guest is actually not going to be checking out in the PMS. So to answer your question, what is the functionality that should sit in the PMS, and what is the functionality that doesn't sit in the PMS? It depends how much you want to control, and it depends how you're going to differentiate your customer experience, what the true things are that you want to distinguish yourself from, and not be the same as every single other company that's using the same software, and it becomes very cookie cutter.
This is very interesting, especially now. I always say that the cool thing about the pandemic, if there's anything good that came out of it, is that to a certain extent accelerated the technology adoption in hotels, but even in other industries by, I would say, 10, 15 years. Okay, and so in 2020, 2021, at least in my experience, I saw an explosion of requests for self-check-in apps, for example, or self-check-in kiosk and so forth. And so let me ask you a straight question, because I understand there is no black and white answer with that. But let me ask you this: like in a I hope post-pandemic or mid-pandemic world, let's put it like this. Do you think self-check-in app should be something provided by the PMS itself? Something that the PMS should integrate in the system, or it should be something that should be integrated by a third party?
I am sorry again. Sorry, no black and white answer. I think the answer will be different for a small company versus a larger company. I think for the larger company, the PMS should do the check-in and have an API that connects with my proprietary app. If I'm a smaller company and I don't have the funding to build that app, then yes, the PMS should be able to provide that. And that should be one of the modules, potentially with an app, with something else that allows that smaller company to compete with the bigger boys, and also say, well, if you're a regular guest here, it may be worth you downloading the Babs Hotel app for you to do a digital check-in and check in while you're in your Uber on your way to the hotel, if that's how you choose to check in.
Makes sense. Michael, very similar question for you. Which features do you think should be built in a PMS in order to still call a PMS a PMS?
I think there's some base PMS functionality, but I think that the real answer sits in what Babs explained, is that today we cannot survive anymore with a PMS being at the base of our technology. We need to start understanding a tech architecture, and we need to have a better view on everything that we need, not only the PMS functionality. So I would say that where in the past we tacked everything onto the PMS and it became either part of the functionality or not, because it was sometimes either third parties passed through. Today, I think that if you want to be scalable, if you want to be capable of reacting to digital needs, reacting to different applications being available to you, or having choices of what you want to use out of a PMS, you need to first think about your architecture. So if the PMS connects everything, it's going to be difficult. Like Uli explained, if it's a platform, a complete different thing. So that's one. The second thing is that if you have open API and people can provide different services that are easily tacked onto PMS functionality, then you can scale back what are the basic needs of the PMS. So I think it's not a black and white like Babs says. It is very hybrid how that is going to grow in the future, and cost sits at the base of that. So what are we willing to spend on the platform? And where do we can get the cheapest and the easiest functionality that fits either a small company, a large company, but we need to understand how our data flows. We mentioned CRM, and we mentioned the importance of understanding with who we communicate. Well, let's be clear, a system of record is extremely important to indicate and to understand where your profiles are managed. And are those profiles basically reactionary, or are we trying to build profiles with a couple of hundred fields in there or thousands of fields so that we can start proactive selling, that we are engaging with our guests? So our mind still lives in the restriction of the current setup of PMS, where basically first name, last name, and with a big hooray, we can add email address to it. That's not a basis to start communicating from a digital point of view with our guest. So I think it is less on what functionality should a PMS not have. How can our architecture set ourselves free? How can we then decide on what functionality we get? And where can we get it for the best price in the constellation that we need? Small hotel, mid-sized chain, large chain, whatever it is. So it's shifting. And I don't think that, with the exception of the larger organization, a lot of hotel operational people have the knowledge to really deal with this. And it is ever so fast changing. So everybody is so hot to trot on digital right now and have a check-in and check-out app. But if you get to the hotel and you still got to get a physical key, then great, yippee-doo, but you have not solved the problem. So look at retail, look at airline, look at other industries that really revolutionize and make us use our devices differently. That's where we need to go in the hospitality industry, and we're struggling at that.
Do you think? Let me ask you something. Do you think our industry is too PMS-centric in a way? Like there was this study published by, I'm not saying the name, but a big big Chinese company, and it was a survey on the use of technology by different accommodation providers, right? And it was pretty much obvious that at the top of the list of the main thoughts of the hoteliers, there was always the PMS. Okay, so it looks like, even though I completely agree with you that it's more about the whole architecture than just a single piece of technology, do you think that we are still living in a PMS-centric industry?
Yeah, I think that today you can easily say that everybody is thinking in the restrictions of their PMS. So we cannot do this, we need that interface, we cannot build easily on, we cannot do our proprietary stuff. It will be complicated. So we as an industry are thinking about restrictions, where if you have an open source and you have a platform and you step that up again, much more expensive, but stepped it up, middleware, then you set yourself free. Then you can have a complete different architecture. Will there be PMS functionality like we know it from the traditional PMS? The answer is yes, there will be. We still need to administrate. We still have the inventory management. So there's still issues that we will need to comply with. But I think that it is a matter of how you call it. And you mentioned it earlier, Simone, do we still call it PMS, or do we start calling it something different? I personally like to distinguish is that if you have an open APIs and an architecture that allows you to build your own tech deck and decide how you want to scale back PMS functionality that you need from a traditional PMS, then you're free to start using different terms. Most people, most hotels, 95 plus, I guess, are stuck in rather traditional PMS setups that they're not breaking away from, because they don't understand enough that you first need to change the architecture to allow you to get that freedom.
So I have a question for you, Michael, because I agree with you, but I'm wondering whether the pandemic may have helped with changing that mindset slightly. And the only reason why I'm thinking that is, as the pandemic started, everybody, as you said, Simone, jumped on we need to do digital check-in, we need to do digital key, we need to do contactless, whatever. And I'm wondering how many people who said, I want to do that, then hit the barrier of their PMS provider saying, oh, we can't do that, or you need to go to the back of the queue and we'll get back to you in 2025 in order to develop it for you. I wonder whether that sort of started to create a little bit more of that idea that maybe the PMS isn't everything.
Well, I think the answer is yes, but I think that people started to figure out already, because of the complexity that PMSs need to, or the added function of being also a connector, they never answered. So the digital requirements, are putting bare that deficiency. And I would say that if you want to communicate with your guest at a high level of digital engagement, you better know by 98, 99% for sure who you're talking to. Otherwise, you can have some pretty bad and ugly faux pas. I think that the industry as it sits today, if they are at 35, 40% of certainty of who is what guest they're talking to, it's high. So the gap is so gigantic that there's a lot still to be done.
That's great. That's great. And Uli, let me ask you something. This is I don't want to be controversial here. I just want to know your opinion, right? And I talk to part of my work is consulting travel tech companies as well. So I talk to PMSs from time to time. And some of them, whenever we talk about open APIs in general, come back to me saying that they prefer to have less API, but more robust ones. Especially, let me give you an example so you understand where I'm going with this. Like, I was talking to a PMS a few weeks ago, and they were connecting an RMS. And the level of information that should go between one system and the other are massive, And they were telling me, there are two ways to do that. We can do a simple simple API connection and we will just get the basic info, but then maybe we want a little more, so we're spending more time in integrating this system. So do you think that when it comes to the main concept of open APIs, maybe we are oversimplifying a problem that is not so simple?
I think with PMS, with the PMS infrastructure, it will always remain complicated. Yes, you're right. There are APIs on top of PMSs, and a lot of people have developed those APIs in the PMS world. However, there is always limitations to those APIs, and the reason for that is that the PMS companies develop their PMS functionality, and then as a next step, they are putting the APIs on top of the PMS. So you will always be limited to the API functionality, how fast it can come to the market. And then there is another problem which actually has limited the innovation in this industry for a long time, which is that the PMSs are all developing their own components and modules. So they are trying to get into all kinds of areas which shouldn't be sitting in the PMS. And then as a next step, they are trying to limit the APIs for those modules. They are trying to push and sell them and restrict other vendors to come on top of the PMS. So this is why we say, how do the PMS vendors believe they can do everything out of one hand? How can they be specialists in every single field of hotel technology and start developing it into their systems with new modules, components, and so on and so on? So I think we have totally to go the opposite way. The platform needs to be 100% API available, and any specialized function and feature and functionality that drives the innovation and digital guest journey and mobile guest journey should come from people out in the field. And if the API platform is good enough, there is no limitations to that. Anybody could go ahead and develop a digital mobile guest app on top of a platform if it's done the right way.
The problem is that usually it's not.
Yeah, usually when you try to develop a new app on top of a PMS, let's say a mobile guest journey app on top of a PMS, you have all kinds of restrictions. It takes a long time, the APIs are not available, and also what we have to mention as well, it costs a lot of money. I mean, some of the big chains have spent tens of millions to get good systems in place, but this is not the world of today anymore. I mean, what I believe in is that actually upfront and professional service cost and interface cost, connectivity should be actually at zero investment. So I believe that platforms today with connected apps could operate just on a subscription basis without any upfront cost at all whatsoever. Even training. I mean, why don't you need to provide training to people if the functions are so intuitive that anybody could start using them?
And do you think, I got the last one for you, but I think it's very interesting, at least for me. Do you think to a certain extent, this tendency is an innovation blocker? Let's say tomorrow I come up with a great idea, okay, something that can make travel so much better, distribution so much better, but I need to connect to PMSs, right? And in order to connect, I will have to wait a couple of years and maybe pay 20,000 euros on top of that. And by that time, my idea will be completely obsolete, and I would not even have the money to connect to all the PMSs to take some kind of some level of market share. So you really think this closeness of the PMS in the current world can be an innovation blocker in the industry?
It is. It definitely is, and it has been for a long time. And it will always remain the case as long as the PMSs will be sitting in the center of everything. It just has shown again and again that this type of infrastructure and architecture just doesn't work.
So we can all agree, like we said at the very beginning, we can all agree that the name PMS is probably wrong. It's probably
I don't think it has to be wrong, but for me the PMS functionality it has to sit somewhere else, and the PMS user interface as such, which the people at hotels might continue to use if they have still people at the hotel level, that is being reduced to the core functions you need to run a kind of a hotel from a PMS user functionality perspective. But anything else, if they want to add new functionality features, new apps around it, if they want to do extensive revenue management or housekeeping, as Bab says, then they can kind of pick their own apps they want to use, try them out, test them. If they are not happy, just kind of deactivate them and try out something new. It has to be today as easy as it can be. Imagine, I mean, why is it possible in so many other verticals to offer this type of architecture and technology? It's just not possible in our industry. I cannot believe that. That's not true.
It's like, if we're going to make an example, like a stupid example, it's like having a mobile phone, and the mobile phone is your PMS, and then you have a bunch of apps doing something completely different.
Absolutely.
Bingo.
And that is right. And I think this is exactly the kind of mentality shift we should have. And I totally agree with you when it comes to that.
Simone, maybe I'm allowed to give an example that might illustrate a little bit what we're talking about. So if you're talking about the interfacing that takes place with most PMSs, I'm not saying all, but most PMSs, it's always very transactional. So it's to a door lock, and it says that between this and this time, this and this name has access to a room, right? If you would have a different type of architecture and you would like to know all kinds of micro detail that sits in an API, which provides you much more information than digital, that at the moment of a checkout, we, for instance, in citizenM have room controllers. So it's a CPU that sits in the room that connects all the technology there. So at the moment that there's a checkout, it's not an interface that says you cannot get into the door anymore. It basically says, hey, room, what are all the settings of this individual? Because it's the guest profile that sits centric. And we store that away. That could be light, that could be temperature, that could be, whatever preferences are linked into that. So you get all of a sudden a profile that builds much stronger that you can do something with. It can have a direct benefit on their return. A guest can get into a room that has the closest temperature to their last setting, saves maybe some money for us. But it can also give a subliminal comfort to a guest that says, hey, I left my room this way. Look, I'm finding it. And it doesn't have to be the same property. It can be a different property in our system. So an API allows you to have micro detail being stored away, whereas an interface is transactional and doesn't do anything with the rest of the information. It just goes lost. And that is, I think, that if you start to think in possibilities, if you start to think in digital, unlocks a whole new world of possibilities.
And I think you mentioned something that kind of opened the door for my next question. And Babs, we were discussing this morning via email exchange, right? And when we talk about PMSs, usually the perception we have is something that is very operational. Okay, so a technology that is used in the back office by the front office guys, by the receptionists and front office guys and so forth. The reality is that to a certain extent, PMS can improve the guest experience in a big way, right? And as we were saying before, some PMSs recently started marketing themselves as a real tool to improve the guest experience. Now, how do you see these two different approaches going together? Because on one side you have, again, something that is usually perceived as pretty boring, not very sexy, just something that you use for the logistic of travel. And then on the other end, you got this new wave of software that promises a completely new guest experience.
I'm sure there are PMS companies out there that are saying that they're improving the guest experience. I have yet to see it, but I'll take them at their word for it. I think here, and it's going to touch on some of the points that you had earlier, is that the PMS needs to be an enabler to to deliver that customer experience that the customer, that the hotelier has to define to say, this is what I want my customer experience to be. And the PMS needs to support that, most likely through APIs, because as we just discussed, that is going to be the most integrated, the best way of transferring all of that information. So again, as Michael touched on it, one of the things in the customer experience these days is going to be related to CRM and data. Personalization is one of the big buzzwords, right? What do I sell the customer based on what they wanted last time and their preferences? And then once I've sold it to them, what else can I sell to them? What should their arrival experience be? Do I need to book something for them? What temperature should their room be at? All of that information has to come from somewhere. Some of that is probably going to come from the PMS. And if there is a PMS vendor out there that can provide all of that and integrate it with all the different touch points on that customer experience, then yeah, they would be part of improving that customer experience and deliver that. I personally haven't seen it coming from a PMS. I still, to Uli's point, I think it was, think that you go and buy best in class functionality for what you want to deliver, and then you make all of that talk to your PMS through APIs or whatever other means. I think one of the frustration things with the PMS in the past few years is, and you touched on it, does it stop innovation? It may not stop innovation if your pockets are deep enough, but it's not been an enabler in the last 10 years.
That's not the case with most startups. That's the problem.
No, but Starbucks didn't. Starbucks may not have started with this, I'm going to call it legacy system. Starbucks may have been more open to updating and making changes to how they work and their POS. I don't know whether they have an API and how they function, but in the last 10 years, from a PMS point of view, it's been a disabler. Companies with large pockets have gone and invested a shed load of money to try and find workarounds and create in between clouds with data and in between things over there in order to make up for things that the PMS can't do. And again, because it's kind of a legacy system and because changing your PMS is hard, once you're an established hotel with a lot of functionality, replacing all those modules with what you want to do is a big effort. There's a lot of companies that are still living with a PMS that doesn't really do what it needs to do for them. Yep. And they're trying to work around it as best they can.
All that thought, because I will probably ask you that later to all of you, because that's an interest, and I have an example of something that happened the other day that I think could explain exactly what I want to say. But before we go into that, Michael, pretty much the same question I asked to Babs. Do you think PMSs can somehow improve the guest experience, or even better, do you think that in the market right now there is a PMS or more PMSs that can actually improve the guest experience?
Yeah, I think in fairness, I mean, the whole core effort of a PMS is trying to improve the guest experience, right? Whether they're capable is a different thing. And I think that there are so many things that are popping up left, right, and center. This morning I was on the phone with an incredible startup and wonderful functionality. And I asked them what their hurdle to market was. Is that, well, the PMSs don't talk to us. I say, yeah, but it's such a great functionality they have. You guys are such a bright kids, how you can work around. So it's again, what Bab says is, how do we find workarounds, or how much money do we spend on workarounds? So again, to the basics, a PMS was doing inventory management and admin. They were never a connector. So they do not have to become a connector, because thank God they're platforms. And there's middleware right now that can become your connector. And they live on open APIs. They live on open source. They have maybe even app stores where you can pick and choose and find these great new things. And if you need to develop something yourself because it is specific or you want to make it proprietary to you, fine, go ahead, go to the API, download it and get it done. So it's like in Bab's word, they're not enablers, they're obstruction. They're choking the industry, and not on purpose. They just never added the functionality that we need today. So maybe it skips a whole generation. So the PMS functionality will live one way or the other, but we need to be connected. So for lack of a better word, we need plumbing. We need better ways to have data be pumped around and be relevant to us and not be room-centric, but guest-centric. And then it will set us free.
But why do you think it's that? Like, do you think like PMSs are building this walled garden of data and working in silos because they're afraid of integrating third parties? It's a political problem, technical problem?
No. There's many reasons. I think that if you look at our industry, we're an industry that has learned by experience, right? We're not a very educated industry. So we cannot articulate our needs. So tech companies and providers started to look at, okay, what do these guys need, and decided for us what it is that they had to create. So I'm sure that there's a lot of functionality that have ever been created by PMS companies that have gone completely to waste because we never needed it or wanted it. But that is not a blame that you should put towards the providers. They're trying to make the best out of it and see an opportunity to sell. It's our industry. We're not able to articulate what it is that we need. We don't understand what is required to run our own business. And I always say, if you go and build a house, would you have an architect involved? Probably yes, because you do not understand about, maybe you understand how you want your room to look, but load vectors, circulation, important things that come into play, you need a specialist for that. So we need tech architecture to come into the equation of how we use our systems today in the hospitality industry. Do we want to make real strides forward?
Michael, a quick question here. How would you name such a platform? I'm struggling to find a good name for that. Would it be a transactional or a digital platform, or do you have any suggestions on how to really call that?
Well, I think it is a connector, right? More than anything else. So the platform allows for data to flow. And, service buses are being used, as you mentioned, in many other industries. And it's really, if you look for the best word, service buses, but those are intelligent. And in this particular case, we're also looking for it just to be the platform where in an open API structure, and that is evolving. And I think that, so a platform, I would still say is the right word, but it maybe needs a little bit of description. But for everybody to understand, it is that the guest-centric data flows. We can assign a system of record, and we can make sure that we enrich profiles with intent, and that the system is enabling, like Bab says, and not obstructing. So at this point, I think Uli, platform would be the best name for it still.
And do you think we are on the right track to make it happen?
Well, Bab said it. I mean, the pandemic really, focused us on making a quantum leap. And I think that when people often asked, is citizenM a lifestyle company? And I said, I'm not so sure, because many lifestyle companies yell, we have curated this and we have curated that. And it's not us. We just look at what is the use of our guest, right? Our target audience. What do they do when they don't use a hotel? Well, if they're online and they're ordering retail, they're being serviced. If I get in my car at night after work, Google tells me you're home in 20 minutes and traffic is soft. It's all suggestive. So I'm so used, I'm so spoiled. And then, I get to the hospitality industry and I'm thrown back into the dark ages. So we used to be inspiring to guests to come to our hotels, and they walked away with ideas. Right now they go like, how is it still possible that I have to fill in a registration card? And why does a large chain not recognize me if I don't have a frequent stay program? Oh, I need to carry my own frequent stay recognition card along, because otherwise they still don't know who I am. It's embarrassing. So it all deals with the architecture that sits behind it.
And that says a lot about, like personalization in our industry. It's such a buzzword. But when you come to the reality of that is, again, before all this craziness started, I used to travel like 100 nights a year, like you guys. Imagine you were pretty much traveling, and it happened to me that I went to the same hotel like 15 times in 1 year. They never recognized me. Yeah. So, and I think that's a big limitation of either the PMS or whatever CRM or whatever app they're using. So,
well, it has two problems. You know, the good old story. You know, is it high tech or high touch? It's both. You know, high tech needs to enable high touch, so people should be able to recognize you. And what we have chosen for is that technology takes care of all the chores, all the stupid things that you don't want to do, so that our employees can focus on you. They will recognize you when you come a couple of times. So it's thinking in possibilities instead of the restrictions that we're forced into because PMS are not connectors.
Makes a lot of sense. And Babs, it looks like you are the star of the panel because everybody's agreeing with you. So let me ask you the last question.
It's because you had me going first, and therefore I got to say it first.
I think so. We should go on counterclockwise. Maybe it would be different, but I don't think so. I think you're just giving amazing answers. So you started talking about that, and I stopped you because I wanted to keep it as the last question because we kept it a little more technical, talking about APIs, integrations, and infrastructure. I would like to give an advice for the average hotelier listening to that. And we all know that changing a PMS is probably the most invasive thing you can do in a hotel, right? You will have loss of data. You will have to retrain people. You will probably lose a lot of records. So it's something that sometimes hotels they don't want to do it, and they just keep working with so-and-so Mickey Mouse companies just because they don't want to go through the struggle of doing this all over again. And but what I saw, and I think this was another good effect of the pandemic, was that now that they had a little more time in their hand, they could actually go around, shop around, and see different technologies. And some of these properties were closed, so they had time to implement different technologies. And there's this fun story that I say all the time. A client of mine during the first lockdown was using a legacy system in the hotel, right? But he could not get out of the apartment because of the lockdown. So what he did at night, he went to the hotel, took the server, brought the server back to his place, and started working from his place. And if you think about it, that's really middle age.
Because he still had to run night audits every night, by any chance?
Crazy. So the thing is that if let's say I'm an accommodation provider, and for some reason I'm working with a clunky old system, right? And I haven't changed it because of all the reasons I told you before. What would be your advice to move to a more agile, open API, open source kind of platform?
Well, the beauty kind of it is today is if you do go for the approach of saying, I'm going to go for best-in-class systems, you can do it piecemeal, right? You don't have to change everything in one go. And so you can say, right, what is the first thing I'm going to do? And again, I'm going to pick on CRM because for some reason it's stuck in my mind. That's pretty easy to take separate and say to your sales team and your marketing team and whatever it is, now you're not going to go to this system anymore, you're going to go to this system. And it is possible to take it in bits. I think as a hotelier, what you need to do is, as I said before, is define what are the important parts of the customer journey that you want to own. What is it that you want to achieve? And then go and find those vendors and then see how you can do that piecemeal, one system at a time, so that it's not a 180 degree change at the hotel on the 15th of April kind of thing. But by using the API approach, you're able to do that. You just stop using a module within the PMS until you're ready to fully decommission your old system and move to the new one. I think one of the issues that we have in the hotel industry, and this time I'm going to agree with Michael, he touched on it. I don't know whether it's necessarily education but there is definitely a lack of forward thinking. And a lot of people have grown up in the industry, and their background is they want to service the customer. Their background may not be technology. So I get where it comes from. But we think we're stuck in this world where all you can do is move from a mediocre PMS to a slightly better PMS, and there are no other options out there. And the biggest thing is to start thinking outside the box and say, I can use a housekeeping management system for my housekeeper that comes from a different industry, and I can use a CRM system that comes from Salesforce or whoever it is. It doesn't have to be somebody who understands the hotel industry, because we all think we're super unique, and in some areas we are, but in other areas we really aren't, and we should learn from the guys who've done it before.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, we are it's basically 1 hour, but I think we can add like 45 seconds each before we stop. Michael, back to you. So basically same question.
Well, I think that today, when hotel companies look at PMS or a new PMS, they do an RFP on functionality, and they first start, on functionality, building everything up. What they don't look at is their architecture. What they don't look at what their feature necessity, their obstructions are, and it's a whole different world. So I think we need to start thinking differently. We need help, and there are great specialists, consultants, specialists that have better knowledge that can help us with that architecture from out of industry. It doesn't have to be from in industry, and we need to take a different mentality. And it's almost like when they asked Steve Jobs when he was launching the iPod, whether he had done market testing. He says, of course not, because they don't know what it is that I'm going to be bringing them. That's a little bit our industry. We're so stuck in it that we do not know what could be available to us if we take a slightly different approach. So rip off the RFP and start thinking what your needs are. Don't start thinking in names, but start thinking in open APIs, start thinking in platforms, start thinking in moving information and data around. And that's a much better way. And then glue in the functionality, I would say. Perfect.
Uli, last word for you. So just give a suggestion to the hotel that is trying to change its PMS.
What I feel is people should be doing is actually try it out. If the vendors are really serious about modern architecture, technology, and infrastructure, there is no reason why you could not try out anything you want. And this without any cost and without any big efforts. And what I mean with this is try to go to whoever wants to sell you something, try to go to the website, register online, configure your hotel or go into a demo hotel, connect apps online, just try everything out. There is no reason whatsoever that technology-wise is not possible. And the same what applies to hoteliers from this perspective also should apply to vendors. So any app, any startup that comes to the market should be able to go to the website of the vendor, register for a developer account, and start developing immediately using the open APIs that are sitting there. And I think this would be the proof on how modern technology could work and should work.
Just a pure plug and play industry.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's very good. Babs, Michael, Uli, thank you so much for being with me today. It's been a very interesting chat. Again, PMS is always a very controversial topic. It looks like everybody has an option about that. And so thank you so much. And I hope we can do it anytime soon. Okay? Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Okay, bye-bye.
No.